Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we have Professor M D Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you.
Today, viewers, we're going to talk about what secularism really means. And to get a little bit more perspective about this hangout, I would encourage you to read today's article by Professor Nalapat in the Sunday Guardian. The title is Stop Delegitimizing the Vedic Age in India. Professor Nalapat, what prompted you to write this article and why do you feel that the secularism definition is embedded in Sanatana Dharma?
Well, I'd like to say that I was a little surprised when the Supreme Court of India decided to set up a constitutional bench of 5 judges to look into the question of a Sanskrit sloka being recited in Kendriya Vidyalayas. I've heard this sloka being recited by my Muslim friends, by my Christian friends, in households across the country. It has nothing to do with religion. It is to do with a concept. And the concept is to bring light into the darkness. The concept is to bring enlightenment. And this, unless you say that only Hindus can bring light and only Hindus can bring enlightenment, there is no way that you can link this particular sloka to a religion. So I was very surprised, frankly, that the Supreme Court has now decided that this should go before a 5-judge constitution bench at a time when, as you very well know, there are immense backlogs in all the courts in India, including the Supreme Court.
Strange that we should mention the phrase Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. I studied and graduated from the Osmania University, which was founded by Usman Mir Ali Khan. I don't know if it is Usman Mir. There is a mention of the word Usman. And this was the only university in the 1920s, to teach medicine and engineering in Urdu. And guess what is there in the logo? Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya.
Precisely. The point is that, if you are, the whole problem is that the British delegitimized the Vedic period in India. They did not want the Indians to know that they had a civilization greater, frankly, much greater than the British civilization of that particular period. And as a consequence, they delegitimized the Vedic age comprehensively, and also they in a sense, demonized the Mughal age subsequently. And as a consequence, we have grown up thinking that it's only the British period that you've got enlightenment and empowerment. The fact is that India became a very poor country, a very illiterate country, and frankly, in many ways, a very socially backward country, precisely during the British period. Unfortunately, after 1947, the governments of the day continued this British policy, continued British education, British systems of jurisprudence, British methods of administration, and frankly, British mindsets, colonial mindsets. And as a consequence, our children are still growing up with only the haziest idea of the Vedic period. In fact, many of them believe the Vedic period is some kind of a myth. It's something for the comic books. It's not real. It was never real. It's only a comic or a cartoon character.
I again encourage viewers to read another book called A Beautiful Tree by Professor Dharampal. And in this, he recounts what type of system of education and who were attending these patashalas, or they used to call them Vedic patashalas or something like that. I don't remember the exact name. It's not important. But what he shows is there is region-wise breakup, like Telugu-speaking regions, Odia-speaking regions, Tamil-speaking regions. And in every one of these regions, the percentage of the Varna or the background of the Varna is described there. And it is interesting to note that unlike what the Dravidians today in Tamil Nadu, or even in some of parts of Andhra also are now beginning to make this noise, that this was not a Brahmin-centric education system. As a matter of fact, the highest percentage one finds in all these different speaking regions was Shudras. Shudras were those who had specific skill sets and they also enrolled and were educated in these schools. So there is, there is no oppression, at least per se, looking at what used to exist before Mr. Macaulay came and upended the entire system and brought and forced English down the throat of the entire India. So all of a sudden, those who did not want to learn this new language suddenly became illiterate. I think that's what you were adhering to just moments ago.
No, Sri, I'd like to point out that I don't believe that the introduction of the English language was in any way negative. I don't believe English language means accepting British domination over our colonial, over our civilizational heritage. In fact, the English language can be a very valuable instrument for integrating India to the global economy and for empowering India. I mean, many of the great Renaissance individuals in India, whether you have Swami Vivekananda or Ram Mohan Roy or so many other people, were all fluent in English. I mean, Rabindranath Tagore was fluent in English. You're not going to downgrade his his contribution because of that. So this, I'm sorry to say, this very tribalistic vision, this very narrow-minded vision of English as being some kind of a foreign implant which has damaged and destroyed Indian culture is not the case. The point is that English needed to be used to shine a light into the Vedic period. And may I also add that so far the caste system is concerned, you're talking about Brahmins and Shudras. Well, the caste system by birth is an abomination. The caste system by birth is something as ridiculous as a Hitlerian concept of the Aryan race and the Untermensch. The reality is caste comes through duty. Caste comes through knowledge. Caste comes through activity. We are all born Shudras. And subsequently, we become Vaishya, we become Brahmin, we continue as Shudras, or we become Kshatriyas through what we do. So if I may say so, this entire concept of caste by birth was, I think, the beginning of the end of the resonance of the Vedic period in Indian culture.
Professor Nalapat, agree and disagree on a couple of things. First of all, let me get the disagreement out. What I meant by saying that English was thrust was it did not get adopted uniformly by everybody, which is what led to India being illiterate. And I was just trying to add to your point, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree on that. But on the word caste is a Portuguese word that means class. And the nearest thing that I can think of is varna or jati. And the word jati itself is something that evolved. It used to be a Vijnani. Vijnani over the time became Jnani, and Jnani was probably harder to pronounce, so they called it Jati. So essentially, people were experts in a certain field. And whether they chose the same profession or went on to choose something else was something that was dictated by what they went and learned in that school. Right?
Yeah.
So I think this is probably where the disconnects are happening. Caste was a Portuguese word that was thrust there. The second thing is the word Dalit. Now, in 1870, this is what I have been given to understand. This was something that somebody researched in the British libraries to unearth this fact. Remember, in 1857, there was the first Indian war of independence, the first war of independence. And after that, the British went, and once they, felt the whole thing, they looked at who aided the sepoys, and they found out these were the large landowners. So what they did was they instilled this zamindari system, which was only in some pockets before that. That kind of got spread even more, and that broke the backs of all the rich farmers. Not satisfied with that, the next thing they did was they found out how were the farmers getting their produce across the market throughout India, and they found that there were these small communities of people. They were taken to what you would call as the people now who make sure that your tiffin in Mumbai reaches your husband's office after changing 20 hands. There is this intricate system of delivery, and they had the same set of people, the same group of community of people who used to make sure that the grains delivered wherever they got the best price. They had a sales network, and the British called these people as sinners, and they called them, you are Dalits, you are the ones. That's where the untouchability came. Because they want to break that sales network. That's how this thing came about. But this is something that is still coming out. So I guess trying to say is that somewhere we need to take a deep breath and start really realizing where India's history is and how it should be narrated.
Well, I quite agree with you. And for example, you have, for example, temples. I mean, Sri Narayana Guru consecrated several idols in several temples, and these idols have immense power. The devotees who go to them come back very nourished and strengthened. And if I may point out, devotees of every caste. In a similar way, what we call Dalits. I mean, you have Dalit priests in some temples, especially in Kerala, and I think that's very, very good. If you can recite the Vedas properly, if you understand all the various traditions, if you understand all the various customs, irrespective of where you were born, you need to be accepted as someone who is a priestly caste. The priestly caste, in my view, are the caste of scholars, apart from being priests in temples. And scholars need to be separated from statecraft. In other words, scholars should not be associated with running a state. They should not be associated with the Kshatriya world. They should not be associated with the Vaishya world of running a business. They should not be associated also with the everyday produce and manufacture of the Shudra world. They need to be in a world in which they are beyond all this, and people can reach that kind of level irrespective of where they were born. I mean, you have Valmiki Ramayana, you have Kamba Ramayana, you have all these great immense treasures of Indian history, and these treasures were created by people who have come from different social backgrounds. Lord Krishna himself came from the Yadav Vamsha, a very noble Vamsha. Lord Krishna, who is one of the great avatars, and he came from that. So I think, frankly, the Vedic period was a much more egalitarian period, was a much less prejudiced period. It was not a period in which we had these so-called Victorian values. It was a much freer period, and that kind of freedom, that kind of intellectual discourse was very essential, frankly, in its success. And the rollback started when it became a little, when all this kind of other social stratifications took place. I don't agree that all the social evils came because of the British. The reality is the Mughals conquered the Hindu chieftains because of social issues, and the Mughals were in turn overtaken by the British, again because of social issues. So they have been there for a very long time. I think we have to face our history very clearly, Sri, and we can't run away from the fact that these issues allowed conquerors to ride over us, allowed people to dominate us. Because if we don't say that, if we say that things were perfect before they came, the question is, how could they come and establish control?
Viewer might be wondering, what is this got to do with today's context? And I think I'd like to put it this way. When the Mughals invaded, you knew who the enemy was. When the British invaded, you knew who the enemy was. But today, the enemy is within. And there are people who are either misguided or for money are undertaking to tell you something that you are not, and trying to tell you that, you belong to something. So they're trying to create divisions amongst us. And that's what we need to guard ourselves against.
Sri, you're perfectly right. My point in the column was basically our sense of nationality, our sense of nationhood. And this sense of nationality and nationhood transcends caste, region, religion. It transcends all these things, income. And this sense is, in fact, unfortunately, not as strong in India as it is in Japan or China or the United States or European countries. And we're talking about the British. We knew the enemy was. Well, let me tell you, the British succeeded in India because they always managed to find Indians who would help them against other Indians. That's what happened. Divisions in India led to the British basically conquering, first allying with one power, then the other power, then a third power, and finally destroying everybody. As Maharaja Ranjit Singh said, "Sab lal ho jayega." Lal was the color that the British used, pink, if I may say so, for their maps. So let's be honest. We didn't know who the enemy was, and even today, we don't know the enemy. The enemy actually is the lack of realization of who we are, the lack of realization of the greatness of our civilization, of our culture, of the different strands of it. And I think that is what we need really to think about and to talk about.
Thank you very much, Professor Nalapat. We'll be back with more such enlightening conversations.
Thank you.